Here is the truth no one expects at a celebration dinner. The moment I confirmed that $60 million had cleared into my account, my own daughter lifted a vial from her purse and tried to erase my mind before dessert was served. The night had the polish of a magazine cover. Crystal stemware, white linen, a skyline that looked poured from molten gold. L'Orangerie, the most expensive restaurant in the city, was a cathedral to appetite velvet banquets. Candles balanced in cut glass. A low violin shimmer sliding through the air like breath on a mirror. I had chosen it because this was supposed to be a benediction over a lifetime of grind. 40 years of building Apex Biodine from a rented garage into a company strangers wrote about and competitors tried to bleed. I was 68 years old, a widower for 3 years, and for the first time since Laura died, I felt something like air in my lungs again. Freedom, quiet, a future that belonged to no one but me. Emily sat across from me, bright as a chandelier, her hand on the wrist of her husband, Ryan Ford. They looked like a pair that had stepped out of an advertisement for impossible lives, tailored suit, diamond glint, smiles calibrated to charm a room of strangers. To you, Dad, Ryan said, lifting his glass of imported water. To the man who built it all from nothing, Emily followed, "We are so proud of you, Daddy." And the words warmed the ear even as the temperature of the room dropped a single degree in my chest. Pride is a pure thing. Hunger is not. Their eyes were not proud. Their eyes were calculating. My phone vibrated. The caller identification spelled the name of the Swiss bank handling the final transfer. I excused myself with a smile, promising to be back in a minute, and walked into the lobby where the floor was polished marble and the ceiling echoed like a chapel. The call was short, the kind of precise language that moves continents. "Mr. Shaw, we can confirm the $60 million has cleared. Congratulations." A lifetime compressed into one sentence. I said, "Thank you," and for a breath I let the weight come off my shoulders. I had done it. I could travel. I could fix up the old ranch house Laura loved. I could sleep without invoices multiplying in the dark. I turned to go back and a young waiter stepped into my path as if pushed there by fate. He was barely more than a boy, perhaps 24. His uniform was immaculate, but his hands were shaking so hard he could not keep the tray steady. "Mr. Shaw," he whispered, eyes not daring to lift to mine. "I saw your daughter. When your son-in-law distracted you, she took a small vial from her purse and poured a powder into your wine." The words struck like ice water. In another life, I have faced hostile takeovers, false rumors, people who smile while filing knives. I can read a lie the way a pianist reads music. This was not a lie. This was terror telling the truth. For a suspended second, my mind emptied. Not of thought, but of denial. Then the old muscle memory returned. "Stay calm, gather facts, control the tempo." "What is your name?" I asked. "Evan," he said, barely audible. "I am new. I did not know if I should." "You did right," I told him. "A lifetime teaches you how to thank the person who just handed you your life back." I pressed a card into his trembling hand and words into his future. "If you ever need help, call this number." I stood in the marble silence, every instinct pulling me in opposite directions. Run, confront, collapse, scream. Instead, I did the hardest thing a man can do when the ground has shifted under his feet. I put my face back on, the one the world recognizes, the composed businessman with unhurried steps, and I walked toward my table as if the only thing on my mind were scallops and a second glass of wine. The dining room breathed money and secrets. My chair waited for me like a witness. Emily's smile could have lit a theater. Ryan wore that easy grin he saves for people he thinks are useful. Saturday. The air smelled of truffle oil and something I suddenly could not name. "Everything all right, Dad?" Emily asked. Her voice was warm honey, but a hunter's patience stared through it. "All good," I said lightly. "The lawyers are already finding loose ends from the sale." I let my hand hover near my glass and did not touch it. I remembered the rule Laura and I used to share in our quiet kitchen, spoken after too many boardroom ambushes. When you do not know the game, slow it down until you do. Memory is a cruel archivist when it decides to play back the moments you ignored. Laura's voice returned clean as the first day she said it. "He only looks at your checkbook, Peter. He does not see Emily. He sees a safety net." I had smiled then, the way men with luck do when they think character is a detail. "He loves her," I told her. "He's just ambitious." Ambition is a fine word for appetite when it is still smiling. 3 years without Laura, and her clarity still cut truer than my optimism. Ryan talked about textiles from Turkey with the tone of a man auditioning for a role as an adult. Emily laughed at the right places, fingers touching his sleeve in that choreographed spousal rhythm that tells a room, "See, we are a unit." They asked me small questions that were not small. "With the company sold," Ryan said, casual as a cat in a dove house, "what happens to the infrastructure, shipping routes, climate-controlled containers? Not the product, not the science. The routes, the boxes. The arteries my business used to move substances you cannot mislabel without going to prison." I said slowly, "The acquiring corporation takes over all assets." He shrugged, as if only curious about logistics and not interested in whether a door was closing on whatever he had built on the other side. I lifted my napkin, dabbed the corner of my mouth, and felt the clock begin to tick in my bones. I looked at my wine the way a drowning man looks at a rope, a thing that could save or finish him. A white powder dissolves fast in red. A liquid would have looked like tampering. A powder is clinical, cruel, designed to mimic a medical event. I thought of the last few weeks, the tiny insults to reality. "Dad, you have been so forgetful lately." "Peter, are you sure you can manage all this money alone?" A story was being drafted with me as the unreliable narrator. That is when I knew. They were not trying to kill me. They were trying to unmake me, to brand me incompetent on the very night my life's work turned into numbers they could hold. I needed time. Without showing, I needed time. I needed a way to transform the table into a stage where I set the marks and called the cues. And so I did what every survivor does when the trap snaps. I made a small mistake on purpose. I let my elbow clip Ryan's full water glass. It toppled, a crystal waterfall crashing across linen, ice skittering like teeth. "Oh, goodness," I said, pitching my voice into the key of harmless old man. Chairs scraped, napkins flew. A different waiter, thank God, not Evan, stepped in with a mini avalanche of towels. For a 5-second hurricane, everyone's eyes left my hands. 5 seconds is forever if you have lived inside risk long enough. But not yet. Not yet. I could not act until I understood exactly what I was switching, exactly what I was preventing, exactly what theater they planned to open at 8 o'clock the next morning in some courtroom where a judge would be handed a portrait of a confused old man who could not be trusted with $60 million. I looked at Emily's face as she watched the chaos. There was relief there, and a glint, not of triumph, but of inevitability, like a person who already believes the future belongs to them. So I smiled, and apologized again, and reached for my napkin as if I were only blotting a spill. In truth, I was touching the border between the life I had earned and the story someone else wanted to write over it. The violinist drew a long note that sounded almost human in its ache. The city flashed beyond the glass like a field of distant fires, and somewhere in the kitchen a bell rang twice, as if the night itself were calling a next course. What I did in the next minute would decide whether I woke up tomorrow as a man or as a signature. They could puppeteer, and the one person in that room who understood the stakes was staring at me from behind a service station, his hands still shaking, his eyes begging me to move. When I lifted the wine glass again, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing against my skin, not just the crystal rim, but the invisible line between life and annihilation. Emily's smile was so radiant, so casual, that for a heartbeat I wondered if the waiter had misunderstood. But no. I had seen that same smile before, the one Laura used to call her performance face. It was the same smile she wore when she wanted something. I took a steady breath, and then I acted. My arm jerked as if by accident, knocking the water glass beside me into a shimmering crash of ice and glass. "Oh no, I'm so clumsy," I said with a laugh that came out 2 notes too high. Chairs scraped, the waiter rushed over. Ryan cursed under his breath as the water soaked into the white tablecloth. In that tiny pocket of chaos, I did it. My right hand picked up my tainted glass. My left hand picked up Emily's untouched one. My movement was as small as a sigh, the kind of gesture that would vanish in the noise of cleanup. I moved them both aside for the waiter's towels, and when I set them down again, they had traded places. No one noticed. Ryan was still fuming about his soaked suit, Emily patting his shoulder, murmuring soothing little words like, "Accidents happen." The waiter apologized and scurried off. I sat there, pretending to fuss over the mess. But inside I was ice. "Dad," Emily said, her voice honeyed, her hand resting lightly on my wrist. "You okay? You seem a little tired." "I'm fine," I said, smiling faintly. "Just a long day." The irony burned my tongue. She thought she was about to watch me unravel a few minutes from now. She would learn what unraveling really looked like. I watched her pick up the glass, my glass, and I had to fight the instinct to stop her. My mind calculated what the drug might do, how long it would take, what symptoms would appear first. A powder that mimicked a stroke or sudden dementia, the perfect way to make a man look unfit to manage his own empire. Clinical. Traceable, but not immediately. It was diabolical in its precision. I raised my own glass, hers, but I didn't drink. To family, I said softly, meeting her eyes. To family, she echoed, lifting her glass, and then she took a long sip, unflinching, elegant as always. The minutes crawled. 15 of them. Maybe less. But every tick of the clock carved a trench into my chest. I watched her talk, laugh, nod, completely unaware that her own plan was now feeding through her bloodstream. The restaurant glowed around us in candlelight. To everyone else, we were the picture of success, a proud father and his devoted family celebrating victory. But to me, the air was electric with dread. And then it happened. At first, it was small, a flutter of her eyelids, a faint hesitation mid-sentence. Then her hand trembled. She blinked again, harder, as if trying to clear her vision. Ryan chuckled, not noticing. "You okay, babe?" he asked. "The lights," she murmured. "They feel so bright." Her voice began to slur. The glass slipped from her fingers and rolled onto the tablecloth. A dull sound, a muffled thud against the linen, and then her body stiffened. Her head tilted back, eyes rolling white. "Emily!" I shouted, standing so fast the chair toppled. Oh my God. Every head in the restaurant turned. Ryan froze, his mouth half open, disbelief painted across his face. For the first time that night, he wasn't acting, he was truly lost. I dropped to my knees beside her, clutching her hand. "Somebody call an ambulance!" My voice cracked perfectly, the sound of a panicked father. Years of business negotiations had trained me for performance, but this was theater born of terror. A hush spread across the room. The clinking of silverware stopped. The world narrowed to the table and the sound of her shallow breathing. Ryan stumbled to his feet. "She's fine," he said quickly, waving his hands at the waiter. "She just needs air. She does this sometimes." "Does this?" I shouted back, my voice trembling. "She's shaking, Ryan. Look at her." "She mixes her medication with wine," he said, grasping for words, his tone desperate. "It's embarrassing, that's all. Just let me get her home." The waiter hesitated, unsure who to believe. But then, like divine timing, the young waiter Evan appeared again, his phone already pressed to his ear. "I've called emergency services," he said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. They said not to move her. Ryan spun toward him, his eyes wild, a flash of fury so pure it chilled the blood. "You what?" he hissed. "You little fool. She's fine." But the manager was already stepping in. "Sir, the call was correct procedure," he said calmly. "Please step back." Ryan's mask cracked. For a heartbeat, I saw the real man underneath a predator cornered, every lie collapsing at once. Emily twitched again, her body jerking in small, rhythmic spasms. The restaurant lights shimmered across the white linen like a crime scene. I held her hand, my own voice trembling. "Emily, stay with me, sweetheart. Stay with me." I wasn't lying. Despite everything, a part of me still wanted her to live. Still wanted this to be a nightmare that could end with a confession and forgiveness. But that part of me was small now, shrinking under the weight of betrayal. Ryan took a half step forward, his face pale. He wasn't looking at her, he was looking at me. His eyes were wide, calculating, terrified. He knew something had gone wrong. When the paramedics burst through the doors, he tried again to control the scene. "No, she's fine," he insisted. "She just fainted. It's anxiety." They pushed past him, kneeling beside her, shining lights into her eyes, checking her pulse. One of them glanced at Ryan sharply. "Sir, step back." I stood motionless. Every detail of the moment burning itself into my mind, the smell of the truffle oil, the tremor in Ryan's hand, the way the music had stopped but the room still hummed with disbelief. And as they lifted my daughter onto the gurney, her face pale and slack, I whispered a single sentence under my breath, one no one heard but me. "You tried to erase me, Emily, but you erased yourself." The doors swung closed behind the paramedics, the echo fading down the marble hall. What I didn't know then was that this night wasn't the end of a plan, it was only the first move in a war I hadn't realized had already begun. The ambulance lights painted the marble walls in red and white as they carried Emily out, her body trembling in short spasms. The luxury restaurant that had felt like a temple minutes ago now felt like a courtroom. I followed them outside, letting my face wear the expression everyone expected the shattered father, but inside, I was already analyzing every angle, every look, every lie. Ryan stumbled beside me, his voice too loud, too practiced. "It's just an allergy. It's shellfish. She always overreacts." The paramedic looked unimpressed. "Sir, she's unresponsive. We'll handle this." He tried to grab Emily's arm as they slid her into the ambulance, his panic no longer the fear of a husband, but of a man watching a plan collapse in public. I stepped forward, gripping his shoulder with a trembling hand. "Ryan, call her doctor. Now," I said, forcing my voice to break. It sounded like desperation, but it was control. The ride to the hospital was chaos measured in seconds. The smell of antiseptic and panic filled the air as the siren carved through the night. I sat in silence, gripping the seat, replaying the moment Evan's voice cracked in fear. The waiter had saved my life. But more than that, he had given me clarity. The betrayal was total, deliberate, and cold. When the ambulance stopped at St. Jude's Hospital, doctors and nurses flooded out under fluorescent light, and Emily disappeared into a corridor of voices and machines. Ryan followed, shouting, "It's an allergy!" Like repetition could make it true. I stayed behind, letting the night air burn into my lungs. I had been in hospital lobbies before, but this time the fear was personal. Not fear of loss, but fear of what I would uncover. Inside, the waiting room smelled like bleach and burnt coffee. I watched Ryan pace, phone in hand, whispering fiercely into it. I could hear fragments: read, dosage, stupid kid at the restaurant. Every word was a nail sealing the coffin of his plan. A young doctor entered, barely 30, calm yet sharp-eyed. "Mr. Ford?" he asked. Ryan spun around. "Yes, doctor. She's allergic to shellfish. Just give her epinephrine and—" The doctor cut him off. "No swelling, no rash, no blocked airway. This isn't an allergic reaction." His tone was clinical, but his eyes were hard. "We're running toxicology now. Whatever she took, it's not food." Ryan's jaw twitched. "You're wrong. Enough," the doctor said, then turned to me. "Mr. Shaw, I'm Dr. Chen. Please wait here." He vanished behind the glass doors, leaving Ryan fuming, pale, and shaking. I sat down across from him, watching the sweat gather along his hairline. He avoided my eyes. "She's gonna be fine," he muttered. "She just mixed up her medication." "Medication?" I asked softly. "Since when does she take medication?" He froze for half a second. "Anxiety, you know how she gets. The pressure." "Yes," I said calmly. "I know." I wanted him to think I was still the gullible old man. It would make the fall sweeter. Hours dragged until finally Dr. Chen returned. "Your daughter is stable," he said. "But the toxicology report shows a massive dose of olanzapine, an antipsychotic. It's not prescribed to her." He looked at Ryan. "Do you know where she could have gotten it?" Ryan blinked, pretending confusion. "Olan what? No. She must have taken the wrong thing. She's on something mild." Dr. Chen's expression hardened. "No. This dosage could cause seizures, hallucinations, even simulate neurological breakdown. It mimics dementia." The last word landed like a bullet. My stomach turned cold. They hadn't planned to kill me. They had planned to erase me. Ryan stammered, his voice high and defensive. "She wouldn't. She'd never—" "We'll see," Dr. Chen interrupted. "We're notifying the authorities." Then he walked away. I turned to Ryan. His face had gone white. His eyes flicked toward the exit, toward his phone, toward the clock. He was no longer pretending he was planning his next move. He stood abruptly. "I need to make a call," he said. I nodded. "Of course, son. Go ahead." My voice was calm, but my heartbeat was a drum. He stepped into the corridor. I waited 2 seconds, then followed silently, staying hidden behind the vending machines. His voice was low but urgent. "Reed," he hissed into the phone. "We have a problem. She drank it. The old man switched it somehow. I don't know how. But listen, the hearing is still at 8 o'clock. You testify. We move forward. I'll handle the rest." He paused, breathing hard. "I don't care what it costs, Reed. Just fix it." Every word seared into my memory. A hearing. 8 o'clock. Testify. This was no accident. It was a blueprint. They wanted my company, my money, my life, all wrapped neatly under the label incompetent. I stepped back before he turned around, letting the hum of the vending machine hide me. He brushed past me moments later, not even noticing. His voice still low and venomous. "It's under control," he said. "He's old. He won't fight." He was wrong. I walked back into the waiting room, my hands steady, my face empty. The clock on the wall read 2:35 in the morning. In 5.5 hours, they would walk into a courtroom and tell the world I was insane unless I moved first. The next phase of my life, of my war, had begun. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting everyone in a pale, sleepless glow. I sat in silence, my reflection faint in the glass door that separated the waiting room from the trauma bay. Behind it, I could see fragments, doctors moving like ghosts, nurses adjusting IV lines, Emily's body small against the expanse of white sheets, my daughter, my betrayer, still breathing because I switched 2 glasses at the right second. Fate had a sense of irony so sharp it could draw blood. Ryan paced like a caged animal, his shoes clicking too loud on the tile. Every few minutes he glanced at me, pretending worry but radiating fury. I recognized that energy, the panic of a man whose script had fallen apart, yet still hoped the next scene might redeem him. I'd seen it before in boardrooms, from competitors who had bet everything on a lie. He was rehearsing what came next. Damage control. Dr. Chen reappeared with the grim focus of a man who had seen too many nights like this. "Mr. Shaw," he said, his tone low but steady, "your daughter's vitals are stabilizing." But the dosage she ingested was near lethal. Whoever administered that medication either didn't know what they were doing or knew exactly what they were doing. He looked between us. "I'm required to contact the police." Ryan moved first. "Doctor, that's unnecessary," he said quickly, slipping into the role of the rational husband. "She's been struggling. Mental health issues, you understand. She must have made a mistake. She's sensitive about it." His voice cracked just enough to sound human. I almost applauded the performance. Dr. Chen's expression didn't change. "Mr. Ford, your wife's blood contains a psychiatric drug in industrial strength. It wasn't a mistake." Then he looked at me again. "Sir, I know this is difficult, but did your daughter ever mention feeling unsafe at home?" That question landed like a stone. Unsafe. The irony was enough to make me laugh. Ryan snapped, his composure breaking. "Don't talk to him! He's been confused for months. He forgets things, loses track of days. He's not himself." "Doctor." Chen's eyebrows twitched upward just enough for me to see recognition. He'd seen this before, too. The overcompensating family member building a wall of lies while the foundation crumbled beneath it. "Thank you," Dr. Chen said evenly. "We'll handle it from here." He turned and walked away, leaving Ryan trembling with fury. When he turned back to me, his voice dropped to a hiss. "You have no idea what you've just done." I leaned forward, my voice low but calm. "Oh, I think I do, son." He froze. That one word "son" hit him like a weapon. I stood, adjusting my jacket, watching the pulse throb at the base of his neck. "Sit down," I said. He did, out of habit more than respect. I leaned closer. "Whatever you planned tonight, whatever you thought would happen, it's already over. You just don't know it yet." He tried to speak, but his phone vibrated again. The screen lit up with a name I already expected read. His eyes flicked toward the hallway, then back to me. "I need air," he muttered, heading toward the corridor. I let him go. The performance needed another act. Minutes later, I followed quietly, staying far enough behind to hear without being seen. His voice carried through the sterile hall, harsh and panicked. "Reed, listen, she took it." The old man switched the glasses. "I don't know how, but she's in the hospital. The hearing's still set for 8. You testify, I'll get the paperwork ready." He paused, breathing fast. "He's old, Reed. He'll break. Just keep your story straight." Every word was confirmation. The poison wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to imitate neurological collapse. Once I looked unstable, they would file an emergency conservatorship, my assets frozen, my signature invalid. Ryan and Emily would control everything. And they'd picked 8 o'clock in the morning, hours after my supposed episode, to make it look legitimate. I felt my pulse slow to something cold and mechanical. He ended the call and turned, nearly colliding with me. For a fraction of a second, his face drained of color. "Peter," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "you scared me. You shouldn't be wandering around. You need rest." I let the silence stretch, my expression blank, unthreatening. "You're right," I said softly. "I'm very tired." He smiled too quickly. "Good. Go home. I'll stay with Emily." I nodded once and walked away, every step measured. He thought the conversation had ended. He thought the next time we met, he would be the guardian and I the helpless ward. He thought wrong. When I reached the hospital's glass exit doors, the first light of morning was a thin gray smear on the horizon. The clock above the reception desk read 3:45. In 4 hours and 15 minutes, they would try to erase me from my own life. But I had built empires from smaller timelines. As the automatic doors opened and the cold air hit my face, I already knew my next move. There was a key under a dead fern at my daughter's house, a laptop in her office that held the truth, and a lawyer who owed me favors that could bankrupt nations. They wanted a senile old man. What they would face instead was the man who had survived 40 years of predators in suits and ties. The night was quiet, the city half asleep, and in that silence I whispered to myself a single promise, not vengeance, not rage, just clarity. By 8 o'clock they will regret ever thinking I was the weak one. The cold air bit at my face as I stepped into the hospital parking lot. Every movement from here on had to be calculated. There was no margin for emotion or hesitation. I walked to my car slowly, head down, the picture of a shaken old man leaving his daughter's bedside. But inside, the storm was forming, every thought sharp, every second counted. At 3:55, I started the engine, merged into the empty boulevard, and drove through the sleeping city that had once carried my name in business journals. Tonight it was a different kind of battlefield, one where the weapons were silence, proof, and time. The mansion on Bellamy Drive loomed dark when I arrived. Emily's lights were still off. Ryan's car was at the hospital, and the security camera above the garage blinked in its steady rhythm. I used the old key under the fern, the same one Laura used when she visited before everything between them soured. The air inside the house was still warm, the faint smell of jasmine candles lingering from dinner prep. I walked past the dining room, past the framed photos of a smiling family that now looked like mugshots from a happier crime. In her office, the desk lamp still glowed. Papers were scattered across the surface, legal drafts, medical prescriptions, and emails printed out like a roadmap to betrayal. But the real treasure was on the laptop sitting open beside a glass of water. Password protected, but I had taught Emily her first password system years ago. She never stopped using variations of it. I typed butterfly1979, her birth year and her mother's favorite word. The screen unlocked in seconds. The email chain that appeared was titled The Shaw Contingency. The subject lines were chilling in their orderliness. Phase 1, assessment. Phase 2, medication. Phase 3, hearing. My name was in every thread. The senders were Ryan, Emily, and a third address, Dr. Marcus Reed. The first email, dated 6 weeks earlier, read, Per our plan, olanzapine will induce cognitive disorientation. Goal: create clinical evidence of incompetence before asset transfer. I scrolled through hundreds of lines of digital poison dates, signatures, even Ryan's handwritten notes about court strategy and guardianship authorization. Every doubt I'd buried now burned with clarity. My daughter hadn't been trapped by Ryan's manipulation. She had been an equal architect. She'd wanted control, power, and validation. Somewhere along the way, love had turned into entitlement. I remembered Laura's words again. She doesn't love money, Peter. She fears losing it. Laura had always seen people's motives before I did. And now, years too late, I understood the prophecy she left me. I transferred every file, every message, every document onto a flash drive I carried on my keychain. Old habits from my corporate wars always carry a lifeboat. By the time the clock on the corner of the screen hit 4:30, I had everything I needed to destroy them. But evidence alone doesn't win wars. You need allies who know how to weaponize it. I left the house the same way. I entered silent, careful, invisible. The first streaks of dawn had started cutting through the clouds when I parked outside a small office downtown. The lights were on, even at 5 o'clock in the morning. My lawyer, Harrison Wright, never really slept. He was the one man I trusted with secrets darker than money. When he opened the door, his expression shifted from irritation to shock. Peter, at this hour? Something's happened, I said. Something you'll want to see before 8 o'clock. We sat at his desk while I placed the flash drive on the table like evidence in a murder trial. Ryan and Emily planned it, I said flatly. The poisoning, the conservatorship, all of it. They were going to have me declared incompetent today. Wright plugged in the drive and read silently for several minutes. His expression hardened. This is airtight, he said finally. They left a paper trail a mile long. He turned his monitor toward me, highlighting the key line from one of Reed's emails. Court evaluation scheduled 800 hours. Transfer to be executed post-hearing. They timed it perfectly, I said. She poisons me at dinner. I act confused, collapse. They rush me to the hospital, and by morning, I'm legally incapacitated. My voice was steady, but my hands clenched the armrest. They thought they were killing a legacy. They forgot I built it from nothing. Wright nodded, already forming a plan. We can stop the hearing. Better yet, we can let it happen and burn them inside the courtroom. I'll file the motion, contact the Federal Fraud Division, and have Reed's financial records subpoenaed. You'll need to be there. Calm, deliberate, in full control. His tone turned surgical. You want them destroyed, not just exposed, am I right? Yes, I said simply. But I also want Emily alive. She made her choice, but she's still my daughter. Wright's eyes softened for a moment. Then you'll get justice, not vengeance. He looked at the clock. It's 5:20. You have less than 3 hours to rest, shower, and get your composure. By 8 o'clock, we'll have them cornered. I stood, buttoning my jacket. Rest is for people who haven't been betrayed, he smiled thinly. Then let's make betrayal the most expensive mistake of their lives. As I left his office, the first true light of morning spread across the skyline. Every skyscraper gleamed like a blade, sharp and cold, reflecting the truth I had just uncovered. They had built a trap for an old man. But when the sun rose on this day, they would discover something far more dangerous, a man who had nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. By 8 o'clock, the courtroom would no longer belong to them. It would belong to me. By 6 o'clock, the city was fully awake, though I felt detached from its rhythm. Cars passed by in steady streams, people rushed to work, unaware that within 2 hours, a courtroom downtown would witness the implosion of 2 lives that had tried to erase mine. I stopped at a small cafe near Wright's office, ordered black coffee, and sat by the window watching sunlight crawl up the side of a skyscraper. Every sip tasted like metal, but it kept me grounded. For decades, I'd fought corporate predators in suits. Today, the predators had my bloodline. That required a different kind of warfare, colder, quieter, precise. At 6:45, my phone buzzed. A message from Wright. We're in motion. FBI liaison confirmed Reed's financial ties to Ryan's shell company in Belize. They'll sit in on the hearing discreetly. I typed back one word, perfect. Then I closed my phone and stared out the window, remembering Emily as a little girl running through our backyard, chasing the fireflies her mother loved. It was cruel how memory could turn soft moments into blades. At 7:15, I pulled into the courthouse parking lot. The building loomed gray and heavy, like judgment itself. Inside, the corridors smelled of disinfectant and ambition, lawyers pacing, clerks shuffling papers, the hum of bureaucracy pretending to be justice. I walked slowly, the old man mask still on, but my steps measured like a chess player about to make his final move. Wright was waiting outside courtroom 3, his tie slightly crooked, his briefcase heavy with documents that could bury a family and a career in one blow. You ready? He asked. I've been ready since the first lie, I said. At 7:58, the courtroom doors opened. Ryan entered first, his hair slicked back, suit perfect, his face arranged into grief. Behind him came Dr. Marcus Reed, tall, confident, every inch the paid expert. The judge, an older woman named Valencia, adjusted her glasses and glanced at the file before her. Emergency guardianship petition on behalf of Emily and Ryan Ford against Peter Shaw, she read aloud. My name sounded strange in her mouth, like something that didn't belong there. Ryan looked around, pretending concern. Your Honor, he began, my father-in-law is in crisis. He's been declining mentally for months. Confusion, paranoia, erratic spending. Last night, he suffered an episode that endangered himself and others. My wife is hospitalized because of his instability. He paused, eyes glistening. We only want to protect him, Your Honor. This isn't about money. It's about safety. His performance could have earned applause in a cheaper theater. The judge nodded gravely. Dr. Reed, you're listed here as the evaluating physician. Please proceed. Reed adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. Yes, Your Honor. I examined Mr. Shaw 2 weeks ago. My clinical opinion is that he exhibits symptoms consistent with early-stage dementia, likely aggravated by stress. I recommend immediate guardianship for financial oversight and medical supervision. His tone was practiced, calm, dripping with false authority. Wright didn't interrupt. He waited until the judge finished her notes, then rose with the patience of a man who enjoys watching dominoes fall. Your Honor, he said, before this hearing continues, I'd like to submit new evidence obtained less than 4 hours ago. He handed a flash drive to the bailiff, who passed it to the clerk. Contained within are 112 emails exchanged between the petitioners and Dr. Reed, detailing a premeditated plan to fabricate Mr. Shaw's incompetence, poison him with antipsychotics, and secure his assets through fraud. The courtroom froze. Ryan's smile cracked. Reed's jaw clenched. The judge looked up sharply. Counselor, that's a serious allegation. Wright nodded calmly. It's not an allegation, Your Honor. It's documentation signed, time-stamped, and verified. The clerk began scrolling through the first few emails, the sound of keystrokes echoing through the silent room. Ryan shifted in his seat, beads of sweat forming along his temple. This is ridiculous, he shouted suddenly. He's making this up. My wife nearly died because of his carelessness. Wright turned toward him. voice level and cold. Your wife nearly died because she drank the wine intended for your father-in-law. You should be grateful Mr. Shaw is alive, or you'd be on trial for murder instead of fraud. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge's face hardened. Mr. Ford, is this true? Ryan opened his mouth, but Reed spoke first, panic seeping into his voice. Your Honor, I was misled. I didn't know the full context. Mr. Ford approached me with documents, said it was for routine evaluation. Enough, the judge said, slamming her gavel once. Mr. Reed, you are under oath. Did you accept payment from Mr. Ford's company to falsify medical assessments? Reed hesitated for half a breath too long. Yes, he said finally, voice cracking, but I didn't realize. You realized enough, Wright cut in, sliding another document onto the table. Bank transfers to your account from Ford Holdings, dated the same week you signed your evaluation. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Ryan's hands trembled as the FBI agent seated quietly in the back row stood up. The judge looked at them, then at Wright. Is law enforcement present? Yes, Your Honor, Wright said. They've been briefed since dawn. Ryan shot to his feet, his mask gone. You think you can destroy me? He snarled, pointing at me. You wouldn't have a dime if it weren't for me and Emily. You're nothing but a relic. I looked at him evenly, my voice low but firm. Then remember this, Ryan. Relics survive, parasites don't. He lunged forward, but two agents grabbed his arms before he reached me. Reed slumped in his chair, face in his hands, muttering apologies to no one. The judge struck the gavel again. This hearing is adjourned. Mr. Ford, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted homicide. As they dragged him away, he twisted once, eyes burning with hatred. You think you've won, he spat. You'll end up alone. I met his gaze and said nothing. Some victories require silence. When the doors closed behind him, Wright exhaled for the first time. It's over, he said quietly. No, I replied. It's only beginning. When the courtroom emptied, the silence that followed was heavier than applause. The judge's bench still smelled faintly of coffee, the microphones still hummed, but the energy had shifted. Justice had found its balance again. Wright gathered the files with the precision of a surgeon cleaning his tools. You did well, he said quietly. I nodded once. So did you. But there's one last thing I have to do. Outside, the hallway was crowded with reporters, flashes popping like gunfire. Questions came fast and desperate. Mr. Shaw, did your daughter really poison you? Was this about inheritance? What happens to your family now? I said nothing. The truth didn't belong to headlines. It belonged to time. As we pushed through the crowd, a nurse from St. Jude's called my phone. Her voice was soft, trembling. Mr. Shaw, your daughter is awake. She's asking for you. The drive to the hospital was quiet. Wright offered to come along, but I shook my head. This part isn't for lawyers. He understood. By the time I arrived, the sun was climbing high, burning the night's shadow away. Emily lay propped against white pillows, tubes running from her arm, her face pale but unmistakably alive. When her eyes met mine, tears filled them instantly. Dad, she whispered, voice thin as paper. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I stood at the foot of her bed, every word measured. You meant to take everything I built. You meant to make me disappear. She shook her head weakly. It was Ryan. He said you were losing control, that you'd ruin everything, that I had to protect what was ours. Her voice cracked. I just wanted him to love me. The confession hung between us, ugly and fragile. For a long time, I said nothing. I just looked at her, my little girl who used to hold my hand on Ferris wheels, who once cried because she thought she broke her mother's necklace, who now sat before me wrapped in the wreckage of greed. Emily, I said softly, love built on fear isn't love. It's debt. And you've been paying his debt for too long. She sobbed, whispering apologies that sounded like prayers. I don't want to go to prison, Dad. Please. I pulled a chair closer, sat down, and leaned forward. You won't, I said. Her eyes widened. You'll tell the truth. Every detail. Every transfer. Every meeting. Every threat. You'll help the investigators, and in return, I'll make sure you're free but broke. You'll live. You'll rebuild. But never again. On my money. She nodded, broken but relieved. I'll do it. I reached out and touched her hand, not as forgiveness, but as closure. Then this chapter ends here. When I stepped outside, the day was bright and cruelly ordinary. People passed by with flowers, balloons, cups of coffee. None of them knew the world had just ended for one family. Wright called to confirm Ryan and Reed were in custody, their accounts frozen, their names trending for all the wrong reasons. The FBI is turning it into a public case, he said. Corporate conspiracy, elder fraud, it's going to set precedent. I smiled faintly. Let it. Weeks passed. The court froze Ryan's assets, and Emily cooperated, her statement sealing the case. The press moved on to new scandals. For me, silence became luxury again, but something inside had shifted permanently. Success no longer looked like numbers. It looked like peace. I donated part of the settlement to a new foundation, the Shaw Trust for Families of Financial Betrayal. The name was long, but the mission was simple. Protect others from what I had endured. When I hired a new assistant to manage the trust, I chose someone I already trusted with my life, Evan, the young waiter who had whispered the warning that saved me. He blinked in disbelief when I handed him the offer letter. Sir, I don't have a degree for this. You have integrity, I said. That's rarer than education. He smiled, eyes shining with the kind of gratitude that doesn't fade. 6 months later, Emily called from the small apartment she now shared with 3 coworkers. She said she was volunteering at a shelter my foundation funded. Her voice was steadier, humbler. Dad, she said, I'm learning what it means to earn something. I didn't say much, just listened. When the call ended, I looked out the window at the city I had built my life in, now quieter, cleaner somehow. People think survival means winning, but it doesn't. It means waking up and still being able to look in the mirror without shame. It means knowing what you stood for when the storm ended. That night, I sat on my porch as the sky turned orange and gold. For the first time in years, I felt Laura beside me not as memory, but as peace. And I whispered into the wind, It's done. They can't take this from us anymore. But deep down, I knew stories like mine never truly end. They echo in boardrooms, in homes, in quiet betrayals whispered behind trust. Someone, somewhere, is pouring another glass of wine, smiling too warmly across a table, believing they've thought of the perfect plan, and maybe, just maybe, another old man will know better because he heard my story. A year later, peace had become routine. The chaos had drained from my life like poison leaving the bloodstream. The headlines that once screamed my name had faded into archives, and the mansion where betrayal began now sat empty, its windows dark and still. I sold it quietly, donated half the profit to medical research, and kept the rest in a trust that no court could ever touch. Money no longer held the same flavor. It was power once, but now it was perspective. Emily lived a small life on purpose. She sent postcards every few months, short notes written in blue ink, still volunteering, still learning. Her handwriting had changed smaller, careful, without the arrogance it once carried. I never replied, but I kept every card in a drawer by my bedside. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. Sometimes silence is the only bridge strong enough to hold both truth and peace. Ryan's trial made national news. The footage showed him entering court in handcuffs, jaw tight, eyes defiant. He tried to blame Emily, then Reed, then me. But the evidence Wright and the FBI uncovered was too deep, too damning. Offshore accounts, falsified medical forms, wire transfers labeled consultation fees. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Reed received 5 for medical fraud. Justice, when it finally arrived, did not roar, it whispered, steady and cold. Wright and I stayed in touch, though he insisted I retire completely. You've fought enough battles for 10 men, he said. I laughed and told him the truth. I'm not fighting anymore. I'm observing. I began spending my mornings at the foundation, meeting families like mine, parents betrayed by children, partners deceived by love disguised as loyalty. Every story mirrored a piece of my own, and in helping them, I rebuilt something in myself that greed had nearly destroyed. Trust. Evan, my young assistant, turned out to be more capable than I'd imagined. He managed budgets, coordinated outreach, even spoke at a seminar on ethics in business. When I watched him that day, standing in front of a room full of strangers speaking about integrity with unshakable calm, I realized the strange symmetry of it all, a young man who once carried a tray, now carrying my legacy. Sometimes fate gives you a second family, one made not of blood but of choice. On the anniversary of the hearing, I visited Laura's grave. The winter air was sharp, and the sky held that pale stillness before snow. I placed fresh lilies beside her name, tracing the letters with my fingertips. You were right, I whispered. About him, about her, about everything. The wind rustled through the trees like a quiet acknowledgement. I stood there a long time, not out of grief but gratitude for her foresight, for my survival, for the mercy of one final chance to set things right. That night, as I sat by the fireplace in my smaller home, I opened my journal and wrote a single sentence. Power means nothing if you forget who you are when no one is watching. Then I closed the book and let the silence fill the room. For the first time, it wasn't empty, it was earned. But even in peace, echoes remain. Every now and then, I still dream of that night, the clink of glass, the candlelight flickering on Emily's face, the waiter's trembling whisper that changed everything. I wake up not with fear, but with a strange clarity. Life doesn't warn you when the people you love become your enemy. It simply waits to see whether you'll shatter or survive. And I survived. Not because I was clever, not because I was strong, but because, when the world tried to rewrite my story, I remembered the one thing they never understood. I had already lived my battles, and I knew how to fight without losing myself. The world eventually forgot the Shaw scandal. New names filled the news, new betrayals replaced mine, and time, as it always does, buried the noise beneath the weight of newer sins. But for me, forgetting was never the goal. Memory is not punishment, it's armor. Every morning when I brewed my coffee and read the financial pages, I still saw the pattern. Greed repeating itself like a genetic flaw in human nature. It was always there, wearing new clothes, new smiles, and new promises. That's why I built the foundation, not as a monument, but as a firewall, one that would outlive me. Evan ran it like a mission. He hired analysts, counselors, and legal teams who specialized in the psychology of deception. We partnered with universities to research the emotional cost of betrayal, and within a year, the Shaw Trust had prevented more than 300 cases of elder fraud. Journalists called it poetic justice. The man who nearly lost everything to manipulation now protecting thousands from the same fate. They were wrong. It wasn't justice, it was redemption. One evening, as I was leaving the office, Evan stopped me by the door. "Sir," he said, his tone cautious, "we received a letter for you. No return address." I took it, recognizing the handwriting instantly. Emily's. The paper was cheap, the ink faded. "Dad, I've been sober from greed for 365 days. That's my word for it, greed. It's a drug, and I was addicted. I clean floors now. I listen more than I speak. Sometimes I still dream of that night, and every time, I see the look in your eyes before I collapsed. It haunts me. I hope one day you can see me as your daughter again." I folded the letter carefully, placed it in the same drawer as the postcards, and locked it. Forgiveness is a process, not a gift. It has to be earned, and time is the only currency that counts. In the months that followed, the government auctioned Ryan's seized assets. I instructed Wright to redirect part of the proceeds into scholarships for underprivileged students in biotechnology, the same field that built Apex Biodine. "Let something good grow from what they tried to poison," I told him. He nodded. "You always find balance, Peter," I smiled faintly. "No, I just learned how to stop mistaking love for loyalty." Spring arrived early that year. The air was crisp and clean, the kind of morning that feels like forgiveness. I drove to the old ranch house I'd kept all these years. It was simple, quiet, and honest. The way I remembered life before success complicated everything. The oak tree Laura and I had planted 4 decades ago was massive now, its roots pushing against the path like veins of time itself. I sat beneath it with my coffee, the same seat where Emily had once learned to read. I closed my eyes and listened to the birds, to the wind, to the steady rhythm of a life that had survived its own collapse. Somewhere out there, my daughter was rebuilding herself one honest day at a time. That was enough. As the sun began to rise, light spilling across the grass, I whispered a truth that took me 68 years to understand. You can lose your fortune, your family, your reputation, but if you keep your conscience intact, you've lost nothing at all. And in that quiet, I realized something even deeper. Every empire, no matter how great, begins and ends not in boardrooms or courts, but at the dinner table, in the trust between hands that once passed the same glass of wine. Because betrayal doesn't start with greed. It starts with love. 2 years later, the world called me retired. They wrote short business features about Peter Shaw, the biotech visionary who built and lost a dynasty but found redemption. They never understood I hadn't lost a dynasty. I'd lost the illusion that blood guaranteed loyalty, and that realization was worth more than all $60 million combined. The truth was, my real life had only just begun. The Shaw Foundation had grown far beyond my expectations. Evan became its face, a calm, confident speaker invited to universities and think tanks to discuss ethical legacy management. He often quoted me during his lectures, though I never wrote the words down. You don't leave your wealth to your children, you leave them your character or your absence of it. Every time I heard him say that, I felt a small ache of pride mixed with something sadder, quieter. Maybe Emily would hear it one day and understand. She kept working at the shelter. The last update I received came not through a letter, but through a volunteer report, anonymous, professional, routine. Employee Emily Shaw. Ford has completed her first full year as a senior staff member. Reliable, compassionate, avoids leadership roles but shows empathy toward residents. It was the first time her name and the word empathy had ever appeared together in print. That was enough for me. I didn't need her to apologize again. I needed her to grow, and she finally was. Ryan's name disappeared completely. The world forgets fraudsters fast. In a digital age, even villains are replaced by fresher scandals. His prison sentence continued quietly. The FBI still sent me yearly updates, but I never opened them. I didn't care whether he was alive, angry, or repentant. His chapter had ended the moment his handcuffs clicked shut. Some men spend their whole lives chasing power, and when they finally catch it, it eats them alive. One rainy afternoon, I visited the restaurant where it had all started, La L'Orangerie. It had been renovated, turned into a sleek, modern bistro with glass walls and minimalist lighting. I sat at the same corner table where my life had split in two. The waiter asked, "Would you like wine, sir?" I smiled faintly. "No? Water's fine." He poured it, left, and I raised the glass toward the empty seat across from me. "To family," I whispered the same words I'd said that night before everything burned down. The toast sounded different now. Sadder, wiser, truer. As I sat there, watching the rain run down the windows, I realized this was the real ending. Not the courtroom, not the foundation, not the awards or forgiveness. It was this, a man alone but at peace, sipping water in the place where he once faced death and deceit. I wasn't mourning anymore. I was remembering. And remembering is how you win against time. When I stepped outside, the rain had stopped, and a faint glow cut through the clouds. I looked up, feeling the sun warm my face, and for the first time in decades, I laughed softly to myself. It wasn't joy, it was freedom. Freedom from illusion, from guilt, from the endless noise of ambition. I had finally reached the only success that mattered. Clarity. As I walked back to my car, a young man stopped me near the entrance. He was holding a menu and looked nervous. "Mr. Shaw?" he asked. "I read your story online. My dad always told me, never mix business with family. He said you learned that the hard way. Is it true?" I smiled and put a hand on his shoulder. "No," I said gently. "I didn't learn that lesson. I learned something better. Never confuse love with trust. One you give, the other you earn." He nodded, eyes wide. The kind of look only youth carries where curiosity meets admiration. As he walked away, I felt that rare, quiet satisfaction that comes when life finally circles back and forgives you. That night, as I sat by the window of my study, the city lights flickering in the distance, I wrote one final line in my journal. It took 60 years, a company, and a betrayal to learn the simplest truth. The cost of wisdom is always paid in love. I closed the book, placed it on the shelf beside Laura's photograph, and turned off the light. The world outside kept moving, but inside that small, quiet house, peace stayed.